Well guys, it's finally here. The Nintendo Switch Lite has arrived. I ended up picking up my Nintendo Switch, the turquoise model one here, on launch day. The Switch Lite costs $199 in the US, and it does have some noticeable omissions from the regular Nintendo Switch that we're going to talk about. But in this video, we're going to take a close look at the Nintendo Switch Lite, as well as do a teardown of the system and take a look and see what's inside and what's going on under the hood. But before we do that, we do have a sponsor on today's video that I want to thank, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community that has over 23,000 classes available over many different skills. If you have a certain skill set that you want to learn more about, you can sign up and join the classes and get started, or just browse around and take a look at the different things the platform has to offer. Now for me, outside of my YouTube channel, my biggest passion is music production, none of which I had any formal training. There's so much to learn here, and it can be overwhelming. I understand how to use digital audio software, how to read and write music, how to mix and master songs, but I'm no expert in any of these, and Skillshare has all these courses and more available in order to take my music production further. One course that I'm really into right now is learning how to master music. Mastering has always been a dark art for me, and this course goes through everything from the basics of setting up your bedroom to EQ, compression, and recommended plugins to use to get that killer sound. Skillshare is affordable. While you do get some free courses, I recommend their premium membership. It's less than $10 a month for an annual subscription, and Skillshare is generous enough to offer viewers of my channel 2 months for free in the link in the description below. Once again, big thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. No one does handhelds better than Nintendo, and the Switch Lite represents the newest in their long line of successful handhelds, and one that will sure to continue that legacy. Hybrid gaming came in 2017 with the launch of the Switch, but it was the Wii U that really planted the seed. The Wii U tablet could control your entire gaming experience. The problem was you needed to be close to the base at all times. Oh, and the battery life was terrible, and no one bought the Wii U anyway. So it's no surprise to anyone that Nintendo announced a $199 handheld-only Switch. The first thing you need to get out of the way is that this is a handheld-only system. You can't dock it, and you can't send video over USB-C to a television. I tested this of course, and it didn't work. This was also confirmed to me some time ago by, let's say, some industry insiders. Now at this point, I'm not sure if this is a firmware thing or it's in the hardware. But one thing that I do know is that this feature was never in Nintendo's plan for the Switch Lite. There's also no kickstand, so you can't prop it up to play. But again, people's expectations need to be reset. This is a handheld. Something like the PlayStation Vita is the best thing that I can compare it to. You'll be taking this Switch Lite with you on the subway, when you're flying, when you're traveling, or visiting your friend's house. You can take it anywhere, but you won't be able to dock it, and you won't be able to use a kickstand. Going back to the PlayStation Vita, if we compare the Switch Lite, it's quite comparable. The PS Vita has a 5-inch display, while the Switch Lite has a 5.5-inch display. Incidentally, the original Switch has a 6.2-inch display. The weight of the Switch Lite comes in at around 10 ounces, very light and good for long play sessions. And speaking of that, the battery life is improved over the original Switch model, but not as good as the newer Switch model, with Nintendo claiming 3 to 7 hours and around 4 on average. That's pretty awesome for extended Link's Awakening sessions. There's also some additional omissions, including HD rumble and the detachable Joy-Cons, but you can pair up external Joy-Cons and you can use them just fine, and yes, a Pro Controller works just as well. The Switch Lite comes with a D-pad instead of the buttons, and I think this is a welcome inclusion. With my playthrough of some SNES classic games, the D-pad held up nicely, and I think this was the right move. However, there are some questions around fighting games and if the D-pad will hold up there, especially compared to the SNES D-pad for example. It's smaller and more compact, and it reminds me of the Nintendo 2DS's D-pad. Now onto the 5.5-inch display. I absolutely love it. It's crisp and vibrant, and one of the things that really makes the Switch Lite stand out. It's noticeable how great everything looks from all viewing angles, especially when we compare it to an original Switch. You can see some differences here. So tearing down the Switch itself is pretty straightforward. You just need a tri-wing screwdriver like the original Switch. There's 4 screws at the back that you need to unscrew, as well as 2 at the base of the system that you'll unscrew as well, which really is pretty straightforward to do. There's not really much else that needs to happen here. And then it's just a matter of getting the case off the back case there And the way that I did that was just to use like a guitar pick or some type of plastic tool that can really just slide underneath and take the back case off. And it should just come off pretty easily. I would definitely not force it. It's clipped on pretty good. There's a lot of clips around the case itself. So just take your time and be careful doing that. Now, as you can see, we have the insides of the Switch here, and there's the big heatsink, which is very much similar to the original Switch with the big shielding that's kind of wrapped around most of the internals. So unscrewing this is pretty straightforward as well with the same tri-wing screwdriver. I believe there's 3 or 4 screws, 2 on either end, and then there's one in the middle there by the fan that will do last. And there's also one kind of just underneath the one that I'm doing right now, which really is all we need to do. So once the last screw has been removed, it's just a matter of lifting off the shielding. It should just come loose and come away pretty easily. And then the next thing we need to do is remove the heat pipe, which is pretty easy as well. There are 3 screws to remove, 2 on the right hand side, and then there's 1 on the left hand side. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward to do. But once again, just make sure you get all 3 screws. And then once you've done this, then you'll have access to the CPU and the memory. Now both of these are contained in some metal shielding, which is also used for heat transfer onto the heat pipe itself. So once we take away the heat pipe, you can see there's a metal shielding there that's covering the CPU and the memory. So I just took that off. It's pretty easy to do. I just used a Stanley knife or a X-Acto knife to get that off. And then we have access to the CPU and the memory. Now the first thing to mention is that this is indeed using the new Tegra X1 Marico revision, and we knew that going into the Switch Lite revision that it was using the Marico chip, which is the same one as the new revision Switch. But just to confirm, yes, it is using the Marico chip, and also the memory chips are identical to the new revision Switch as well. And one thing that's very apparent to me looking internally inside the Switch here is that there is no video display processor at all. So in other words, there is no way that this Switch Lite, without any hardware modification or any aftermarket hardware modification, can ever externally display to a television or an HD TV. Which really, answers that question, because we weren't really sure if it was going to do that or not, but there is no circuitry here at all. Okay, so we have the case off and we have a look at the internal. So let's go ahead and walk through what we have going on here. These 2 pieces of plastic are the internal speakers, which route the sound to the base of the Switch Lite. Now this is the SD card slot. There's nothing special here. And then there's this compartment which contains the flash memory, which is identical to the original Switch. The Tegra X1 and 4GB of RAM we've already talked about, and the shielded portion houses the chip for the onboard Wi-Fi. Now, although there's no detachable Joy-Cons on the Switch Lite, these joysticks use separate PCBs that connect to the motherboard via ribbon cables. Now the bad news appears to be that for those people that had drift issues on the original Switch, it appears as though the exact same analog sticks and design are being used in the Switch Lite. So will we see any drifting issues in the Switch Lite? Well, hopefully not, but certainly time will tell. Then we have the USB-C connector at the base and the battery, which is the smaller 3570 mAh battery, but we get 1 extra hour of battery life over the regular Switch, and that's thanks to the newer Tegra X1 chip. I think it's a fantastic system. I love the handheld, and it really is the next kind of generation of handheld that I've been looking for. I've been a big fan of the PlayStation Vita, and the Switch Lite does compare to the Vita in lots of ways, especially the form factor, the way it feels, the buttons, the analog sticks. There's a lot of similarities between the Switch Lite and the PlayStation Vita than, more than you would actually think. And I really appreciate the design of the Switch Lite. I think it's a great handheld, and it really is one that is going to be very successful for Nintendo in the coming years. Now, one quick thing to mention before we wrap up is the hacking attempts on the Switch Lite. Right now, it's really too early to say what the future will bring for the Switch Lite. Obviously, the Switch Lite has the new Marico chip, which is the same one as the new revision Switch. And obviously, there has been some work done to try to defeat security on that particular chip, but it's going to take some time, and there's a likelihood that it may not even happen for a long time. But if history tells us anything, guys, it's that everything gets exploited eventually. It just depends on how long it's going to take. I mean, it could very likely be the next revision of Nintendo hardware gets released before the Marico revision Switch hardware gets exploited. I mean, that's a possibility that you have to really consider when you think about these things. But on the flip side, there is work that's being done today that I know for a fact that people out there are trying to, do things like glitching in order to glitch the CPU, in order to, boot into the system in some type of exploited or unsigned code fashion. So there's kind of glitching attempts that are happening right now, as well as the traditional stack and buffer overflow type work that's being done in order to see if there's any exploit from a software perspective that can potentially open up the system. But, the reality is right now, there is no known method to modify or hack a Marico revision Switch, which also includes the Switch Lite. So it may happen this year, it may happen next year, it may not happen for 5 years, it may not happen at all. We'll just have to wait and see what the future holds. But obviously Nintendo took the blows of the original Switch security being completely busted open pretty much from the beginning very, very seriously, and worked very diligently and put a lot of money and research into ensuring that this doesn't happen again, at least from the jig approach, in order to exploit the device from what happened in the first revision of the Switch. Well guys, I'm going to leave it here for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, you know what to do. Leave me a thumbs up and let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now.